Hey guys, here we are again, talking about coaching, here with Yannick and Sivash. My question today is, and I'm sure many people share this question, is how much should I be charging for a coaching session?
1 trillion gazillion pound.
I thought you might say that.
I'm not sure if that's the original quote.
I saw that one coming.
It's such a common question, it's such an important question, and it's got so many angles to it, so I hope we can at least cover some of them, because there's a lot of thoughts that immediately come to my mind. One powerful experience I've had in my life is the more I charge, the more my clients got out of the coaching, and that was quite mind-blowing for me, because at some point I put my prices up like 600% because I was on the same price for ages, and I realized I was just afraid to put the prices higher because that would mean more responsibility, more pressure on me to deliver on that sum that I'm asking.
Yeah.
So for many years I was at £50 a session. I was very happy there. I felt like I worked myself up to £50, but then for like 6 years or so I was at £50. And then one of my students said he's 75 going up to 90, and he had been coaching for like a year, and he was a really good salesperson, but like at the same time I'm like, my students can't charge twice as much as me. That doesn't seem right. And he was good. He was a very talented guy, but also I mean I did have like 8-9 years more experience. So I'm like, surely I should put my prices up. And then I had interesting conversations with my coach as to what's holding me back from that. And I hear that again and again from coaches that I work with, and coaches in supervision. Is like, well, I'm scared of putting the prices up because that means, you know, I need to now. For me, a big thing was now I needed to sell, you know, and I had a big problem with selling at the time. Because I had lots of these negative connotations around it, being manipulative and just getting into people's heads, and you know, then I realized what selling is actually about, which is, you know, you're offering a service to somebody, and if you're doing it authentically and ethically, then actually you both win, and usually the client wins way more than we do, because every amount that I've ever received for coaching, that I've ever been paid for, was spent by the end of the year. And most of my clients still walk around with the results every day.
I see, yeah.
So we're always getting the shorter end of the stick.
Yeah.
But then putting up my prices radically at that certain amount of time, in the next 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months, I wasn't a better coach, but my clients, they got so much more out of it, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. The first time I paid £3,000 for 6 sessions, I was on time. I did the work in between sessions. I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about.
Right.
I traveled far to get there, which really put my mind to it. I traveled back. I made plans. I put strategies into action, you know, because I wanted to get my return on investment.
Yeah.
So, you know, the more the better, up to a certain point where it just becomes ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the other point is I needed to then sell. Now that it's more expensive, now that people have to make a serious investment, 2 things happen. First, you need to be better at presenting it in a way that people realize the value that they're getting in relation to what they're struggling with, or who they want to be, or what they want to do. You know, and at that point, you need to be more clever around how you position your offer in relation to what they're trying to achieve or avoid. You know, and if you do that well, then they're going to separate from their money, you know, and it's a really good investment. If they don't quite know what they're spending so much on, because they're just kind of here to check it out and see what the coaching is all about, you know, with lower prices, you can do that, because what's the worst case scenario? You lose 20 quid, you lose 50 quid, you know, and it didn't work out. If somebody says, it's 2 grand in advance, it's 10 grand in advance, it's 1 grand in advance, you know, and you're not going to get it back because I expect you to do all the work. People have different ideas around refunds and stuff like that. But if you pay in advance for something, you commit. If your coach asks you to commit, that's a different process. So with higher prices, you weed out the people who are not so committed.
Yeah, you know? That makes sense.
In the beginning, you want to work with everybody because you want as much practice as possible. So I think, to answer the question a bit more directly, to be fair, you know, in the beginning, charge something. Please charge something. Everybody can charge for their time. You know, just creating a space. You don't need any skills at all. You just need to show up and be interested in what your client is talking about. And if you do that successfully, which is really not hard to do, to show up and be interested in helping somebody, that's worth an investment. And if you get that right, in the beginning you can charge a lot less, charge a little bit because people are more committed, and it sends a certain message. But then you can work yourself up. You know, there's so many programs out there. It's like, oh, become a 6-figure coach in like 6 months or 10 months or 18 months. You know, it takes a little while to up your skills to a level that actually matches that. I can see how coaching is really much better than other services or other products, because often you don't just have to not be in the way of a client developing, and they're doing pretty much all the work. You know, because if you're the kind of coach that doesn't give guidance and is not directive and it's not giving you the 10-step process towards leading a successful business, but if the coach is facilitative and helps you create answers, gives you a place to think, you know, then you don't need to have the answers. You just give the place for them to think and be curious and interested. You know, the more skills you have around process and contracting and this and that, the better. But you can actually charge quite a lot of money quite early, because the space is so useful and people get so much from it because they don't take this space on their own or with somebody else. You know, if you're a fantastic listener, you can charge for that skill. You know, so I think if in the beginning you charge, I started with a $5. You know, when I went from free pro bono coaching to charging £5, it changed because people didn't miss sessions anymore and they were more committed. And I'm like, this is just a $5. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But just an exchange of something is worth something, you know, and then you can very quickly, I think, go to what you would be earning if you were doing your other job, your day job or the previous job. Or you could literally put any price on it. I think the standard prices are somewhere between 50 and £150 for life coaching.
Is that per hour?
That's per hour or
Okay.
per session. It depends a little bit.
Okay.
But I think that's the research I've seen per hour, and then it triples or quadruples for organizational coaching. If you want to look that up, the EMCC, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, does a survey on how much coaches charge, and yeah, that'll be useful. There are some numbers out there.
Okay.
What's your experience? You're working with a bunch of coaches too, right?
Yeah, I think you made a very good point. So I've met a lot of coaches who have really high prices, but struggle to get clients, right? And I think, you know, what I personally recommend coaches is really to get experience, to fill up the practice, and do it at a price where they're happy. So whether that's £50 an hour or a smaller package, I would start there. And at the same time, I would also, you know, encourage them to experiment a little bit more. You know, especially when their practice fills up. I think what often coaches experience, and you might have experienced that, is that, you know, you're full, right? And there's only one of you, right? So as the demand grows for your service, your value increases. And this happened to myself. So I started at £1,000 for 3 months of coaching. And often people ask me, like, why 1,000? Well, it was because I was getting £1,000 in my job, right? So the logic was for me, it was just, okay, let's start there. I filled up my practice and I kept increasing my price. And it came to a point actually where I kept doing that for the last 3 years. Fill up, increase. And what I use as a guideline is just to work with 5 people, 10 people at a price, and then increase it. But I think what's important as well is to not get, you know, we very easily fall into like comparing with others. Oh, this coach is, you know, you mentioned your student. And I think this happens to all of us, that we look at another coach and say, hey, that coach is charging like £10,000. Maybe I need to increase my prices a little bit, right? I've done that in the past and it became really uncomfortable. Whenever I was talking about my prices, I was like, you know, the certainty was gone. So I decreased it actually. And this is something that a lot of people talk about, but I actually reduced my prices, filled it up, built my confidence, and with that, you know, start increasing my price again. So when I started coaching, I started charging £1,000 for 3 months. And the reason I started with that is because that's how much I was earning in my job. So I was really comfortable with that. And as my practice filled up, I started increasing my price. And actually, I want to share a little bit about that experience. At one point, I increased my price so much because other coaches were charging more that it became really uncomfortable. And for 3-4 months, there was a lot of great people coming into space that I was coaching in, but they couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up struggling as a coach financially. And this is where I was already charging full time. So I actually reduced my prices, and this is not something people often talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I reduced my prices, increased my confidence, filled up my practice again, and then slowly, gradually, what I start doing is in NFL there's this strategy, they call it. Well, I forgot the name, but what they do is they throw 3 long balls and 1 short one. And this is a strategy that I learned from my coach and that I implemented in my pricing. So with 3 new people, I would give my current prices, and with 1 I would give the increased price.
Interesting.
And that way I kept, having a good practice, but I started getting more clients at the higher prices. And
Are you not worried that some at the new price would find out, or somebody gets the old price after somebody else got the new higher price, and then because I would feel really weird if I find out that somebody else is getting a much lower price from you.
That's a good point. I think what I got from Steve Chandler, one of the coaches I've been working with, is that coaching can be very project based.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've created is that higher price is a different bespoke package.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe include a day of coaching in person, a bit more touch points.
Mm-hmm.
What I've personally done right now, and normally we don't talk a lot about numbers, but I'm happy to share some numbers just to give you an idea of what's possible. Right, I've grown from in 3 years' time for 1,000 to charging 25,000. And it's just been really about creating an experience. And I personally don't offer that to everyone, right? And I think it's just really about that, finding the right person where it can be really, where first of all they can afford it. They maybe, they have a problem big enough,
Mm-hmm.
right, to work with. But for me, it's also about, experimenting and being playful with that. So what I've created is a package where the client has more access to me. Where it's not like 24/7, but it's almost like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then making that really exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the cool thing with coaching is you can be very playful. You can have clients every week, maybe with no interaction in between, but some people actually appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that level of interaction.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point, and kind of segues into another question that is very related, which is like, how do I structure my packages? Because there's and should I give people my prices when they ask me? Sometimes I get an email and saying like, hey, I just want to ask, do you have availability and what are your prices? And especially if you charge higher prices, you might miss out on a client if you tell them a high price very early because they like that sounds expensive. When actually if they would have come in and they would have realized, I talked about putting the price in relation to what they might achieve, who they might become, because $3,000 for coaching sounds like a lot, but $3,000 for getting 2 years of your life back because you quit your job 2 years earlier than you otherwise would have, or you've gotten out of a relationship 2 years earlier than you otherwise would have.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 years of your life back. That you
Yeah.
don't live in pain and misery or in dissatisfaction. $3,000 for 2 years of your life is not that much
It's a good
when
price.
you look at it when you're 70 years old and you're looking back. Or you're looking at like, well, if you're 37 and you're a woman and you want to have kids,
Yeah.
2 years of your life and getting out of a relationship can mean a huge difference to your life. So that's why I'm hesitant to give people my prices, but you might have a range, and just as you just said so much, when people ask me, I tend to say, well, it depends, like how much is it? Depends how intensely you want to get involved. There's packages where you have a lot of access to me. There's a VIP package at a similar rate to that high one where you literally can call me anytime. I don't want more than 2 clients like that.
Exactly.
Because it's a lot of hard work and that's a lot of responsibility just to kind of be available. when they need you, and if they need you to fly somewhere, you're gonna fly there. But then there's packages where, they're 50 minutes and I can start a new client in the next hour.
Mm-hmm.
There's other packages where I block 3 hours every time we meet, and it takes as long as it takes. We never get to the 3 hours, or very rarely.
Yeah.
Shout out to Georgie there. That's really useful, because then you can have a bit of a sliding scale. If you don't have that much to invest, you can still buy into time for me. Plus, I have two slots where I work with people that just can't afford the normal rates, and I ask them to pay me something that is a little bit stretching, but I really don't care what it is with those two clients. And I think that's another important point, that somebody's £3,000 is somebody else's 100 or 50.
Yeah.
It's really, for me, it's more important that it's a bit of a stretch than that I get a certain amount.
Right.
So what I often say is, and I really believe that the money that my clients pay me, they're not necessarily for me to live a certain life. They're more for them to get the right results. It's enough for them to be stretched and really commit.
Yeah.
Because commitment buys
Yeah.
success and change.
I love that
money buys
example,
commitment.
I love that example, and I think there's a great story that I heard from Steve Chandler, and so his coach Steve Hardison charges $150,000, and it's on his website, and people have to pay up front. And he had actually a billionaire come to him, and at the end of the 2-hour coaching session, the billionaire said, "Okay, this was really great," and he took his checkbook and he started writing the 150,000, but he said, "Hey, stop there for a second. For you, it's 1 million." And he said, "Well, what do you mean? It's on your website, says 150. But he said, "Look, for you, that will be that won't be enough for you to really commit to this." And actually, the billionaire wrote a check of $1 million, and they coached for a year. And I think that's such a great point, because if we are aware of our client situation, we might adjust to that. And I think it gives us a position. I think as a coach, we have a lot of responsibility. I personally do that as well. Really look at where someone is, and sometimes we can just lower that. Especially as a coach, when we increase our prices, we will find that some people that are maybe a right client that can't afford it. So one thing that I do is basically one thing that I learned, and that's really useful, is maybe having a baseline offer. So for example, 2 years ago, my baseline offer was £100 an hour. So if I really want to work with someone and they couldn't afford the 3,000 package or the 6,000 package, but they could afford 200 an hour, 200 a month. So I'll say, okay, what about we do 2 hours a month, right? So you could go back to that baseline offer. So that way you can increase your price, you can keep it at a, maybe some people can afford that, and you're going to be really happy with that. But at the same time, there will be people coming in. You're coaching, but you also have some cash flow. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because you're running a business, right? You need that cash flow. We don't want to be all about giving and then end up working in Tesco, right? And filling shelves, and actually, you could make a great contribution to people and to the community, to society in general. Yeah.
So yeah, think about it. It's a very individual thing. You need to own it. You need to pitch it with confidence. You need to know that that's worth it. And it took me a little while to recognize that whatever you pay, that's worth it. Whatever somebody's willing to pay. If you're not a horrible human being who's actively in the way of your client progressing, then I get it. It's like, if you put your prices up a lot, it can be a difficult space to hold. But if you look into some of your client stories and what they get out of your work, my experience is that whenever I ask coaches who feel very timid to ask for more money or raise their prices, whenever I ask them to tell me about some stories that their clients have achieved or where they got value from it, the amazing stories pops up. And literally every single time I ask, don't you think that's worth at least 300 or 500 or 1,000 or 3,000 or however, what they were hesitating putting their prices up to, they're like, yeah, no, absolutely. And if you make that connection between that kind of outcome and that price you put on it, that's why it's useful to work in packages and not by the hour, because then you put the price and the fee in relation to the result rather than in relation to the time that they spend with you. And that's really, really useful if you want to gain that confidence of putting your prices up. And
Yeah.
you can go up and you can go back down if it doesn't work. That's completely
Yeah.
fine.
And I think you get a really good distinction there is that it's not, see, most people don't have a budget for coaching,
Mhm.
right? They come to coaching, but they don't really have that budget. So if you can really connect them to that possibility, to, hey, what's the result that we could create together? You know, they're willing to go beyond what they think is affordable.
Mhm.
I mean, I've done that myself many times, and I've seen that over and over again. And I think one thing to mention is that you mentioned not being comfortable asking for those prices. Something that I've experienced myself, and maybe you've done that as well, is that I've become comfortable asking for those prices once I've invested in. So the first time I paid,
That helps, yeah.
the first time I paid 3,000 for a coach, I was comfortable asking that price. The first time I paid 10,000 for a coach, I became a bit more comfortable, because for me, again, it feels a bit more integrity, you know, being aligned with that. And I think it's a powerful place to come from as a coach if you have your own coach, whether, you know, and especially having a life coach, because, you know, it's like having meeting a dentist with really bad teeth, right? You don't want to be treated by that dentist. And I think, you know, as a coach, when you have your own coach, you know, you'll start doing much better, especially in this profession, because it's really about walking your talk.
That's fun. Okay.
So yeah, go spend some money on coaching. we can support our own industry between each other. I actually had that somebody said like, oh, so you because they found out I work with other coaches, and they're like, oh, so you're one of those coaches who only works with other coaches. I'm like, no. But there is a self-sustaining thing, because it is an easy sell, so to speak, you know, because coaches are already convinced that coaching is a good thing. You know, when actually an enormous amount of coaches don't have coaches. And it's phenomenal to me. But like when we invest in ourselves and getting a coach, if we invest money in a coach, we can speak from personal experience. We can genuinely say that's worth it. You know?
Yeah, and I think it's
powerful.
almost like a hidden or superpower. For me, I made a decision to always have one, and I think it's, you know, having different coaches allows me to come from different places, and it's so powerful. And yeah, it allows you to be that hero that you want to be. I love I love Superman, Batman, and stuff, and I think it's really about that. You know, it allows us to really step into our power. Yeah, so I wouldn't just invest just for the sake of it. You know, do your research, find a really good coach, but do it. You know, it's gonna pay off. You know, like Yannick said, get a bit uncomfortable and stretch yourself a little bit.
Powerful stuff. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, and I'd be interested in the range of what you guys charge, what you think about this, any inspiring stories. Do share, because the more we share with each other, the more we hear those kind of stories, I think the better, and the more confident coaches we have out there who say, I know I'm worth this, I think the better for the world in general. See you next time. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that, you know what to do. Hit subscribe and send us a question. See you next time.